Hey everyone, and welcome to Three Black Women and Their White Coach,
a podcast where we have a conversation around navigating race in the coaching industry.
And we're your hosts.
I'm Catrice Stetson, your mixed race internet bestie and serial entrepreneur who's built multiple businesses from the ground up.
And I'm Brianna Lachelle, your biracial nonprofit coach whose focus is on helping support nonprofit leaders and founders create impact-driven organizations that radically change their communities for the better.
Here at Three Black Women and Their White Coach, we dive into hard conversations centered around racial inequity within the coaching space with softness and grace.
Our hearts are to open up these conversations and create a safe space for people to be seen, learn, and create a better, more inclusive environment for all.
So pull up a chair, your favorite snack, and a bevy while you yap with your new biz besties as we work to make the coaching industry a place where we all feel welcome and respected. In today's episode, we're diving into two words that get thrown around a lot but often lack depth: accountability and allyship. We'll unpack what they really mean. Hint, it's not about a social media post, where the idea came from, and how they show up or don't in the coaching industry. We're also sharing personal stories of allyship done well and not so well. This isn't about shame or performance. It's about doing the work for real.
Before we begin, we want to be clear about the heart behind this conversation. When we talk about allyship and accountability, we're not here to shame anyone. And we're definitely not here to paint all white coaches as harmful or all Black women as powerless. We know this topic is layered. It requires care, nuance, and a willingness to hold tension without shutting down. Our goal is not to cancel, it's to call in, to create space for growth, reflection, and a real change. We're speaking from lived experiences, not from a place of blame. If you're listening with a heart to understand, you're welcome here. This space is rooted in love, not ego, and that's exactly how we're showing up.
So what is allyship? It's ongoing active support for marginalized communities that involves listening, learning, unlearning, and using your privilege to take meaningful action without centering yourself. Allyship is practiced, not proclaimed. But also on the flip side of that, what is accountability? It's taking responsibility for your impact, not just your intentions. It means being open to feedback, making amends, and changing behavior, even when it's uncomfortable.
And just talking about it historically, allyship in the civil rights movements is a huge part of where people really, I think where this conversation really starts popping up. And when we're talking about white allies like Anae Brandon and Viola Louise, who worked with, not in front of, Black organizers. And then coaching culture and personal development often browse language of activism without applying the practice of accountability, which is a huge issue and a huge part of why we want to have this conversation, because ultimately allyship without accountability, that's just some good branding, y'all. And that's just not enough.
It just isn't enough. In episode 3, we kind of talk about the origin story of this podcast. Allyship was actually a really big focal point of conversations that were had on that retreat, in which we met and connected and were inspired to start this podcast. Because like the quote that Brianna just read, allyship without accountability is just good branding. When you are willing to flex, I will always go back to this, I read White Fragility because this is something that a coach said to Brianna and I. Just because you read a book doesn't mean that you're an ally. If you are not willing to do the work and be accountable to the actions and things that you probably have done in the past prior to reading said book and able to make amends for the harm that you potentially did, you're not, it's just performative and it's just good branding. It's just good marketing. Being able to say, oh, wow, look how many women of color or people of color are in my program. Are they there because you intentionally were I want to create a space that is welcoming to all people of all ethnicities? Or did 4 or 5 Black women be like, you know what? I'm signing up for this program today. And they all did it at the same time, And so, like, really, I think it's such a big mindset shift of without accountability, you aren't an actual ally.
Yeah. And I think like the biggest thing for me when it comes to allyship is that you have to be having real conversations and you have to be open to hearing when you're getting it wrong, even if you're really trying. And I think like one of the best examples I have for this is like actually a personal one. In 2020, because we all know all the things that happened in 2020. I had a specific friend who is a white woman. She's been my friend for almost 9 years now, and she really wanted to start having questions. She wanted to start having conversations, and she had a lot of questions. And the first thing she did when she approached me is like, "Hey, Brianna, I want to talk to you about something, but I don't want you to feel like I'm just talking to you because you're my Black friend. And I don't want you to feel like I think that all Black people think exactly like you. I don't want you to feel like uncomfortable, but you are one of the best people in my life. You're someone I admire. You're someone that I really respect your feelings and your opinions, and I'd want to have these conversations with you if you're comfortable, but I don't want you to feel like I'm making you my Black friend." And so starting the conversation off like that, it could have gone really bad. Like it could have gone really bad. But me knowing her and knowing like her heart, I was in myself, I'd be like, okay, I was like, I'm happy to have conversations with you if you're happy to receive feedback. If you're okay with me telling you, like, hey, that ain't it. And I'm like, she's like, okay. She's like, I also don't want you to feel like you have to teach me everything, but and she outlined, okay, here's what I'm doing by myself. Here's the books that I'm reading. Here's the podcasts that I'm listening to. Here's the Black creators that I'm following. Here's like the history that I'm researching. Here's what I'm doing on my end, but I would really love like your personal perspective on certain topics and to be able to ask you like certain questions. It's funny because in 2020 is also when I got engaged, and this person was also in my wedding, and me and my husband had decided that we were going to jump the broom at our wedding, which is a very historical Black thing. And so she was asking me questions, and it was so sweet that she was so intentional and so cautious of how she was approaching me to make sure that I wasn't being hurt by her questions or how she was questioning me. But it was a really beautiful experience for me to see what true allyship could look like when people care about the people that they're in community with. That's a really special, and I mean, obviously the dynamics is a little different when you're talking about a friendship versus a coach client relationship, but that was a really good example of questions open the doors for conversations, and conversations open the doors for us to actually understand and to start taking accountability and to show up the way that our people need us to show up.
No, for sure. You never know though, like where the conversation's gonna go when they're like, I want to talk to you about something, but I don't want you to think that I'm only coming to you because you're the Black friend. Like, it's all about intent and impact, and
Yeah.
there's so much that goes into it, but I kind of giggle when you started that story because I just was like, you just never know
Yeah.
where that's going. Like, it's either a recipe for an amazing conversation that can be deeply bonding, or it's a recipe for like absolute disaster. Like, you're out
Yes.
there fighting for your life.
Yeah, I mean, I have stories of where, like, so in high school, I was a part of this group of friends, and I was one of two Black girls in our friend group. And one of them, we were both kind of, sometimes we were both in, sometimes one of us was in, sometimes one of us was out, that type of situation. But I had one person who there was a lot of things that went into him and his personality, but consistently in high school he would say things that were inappropriate, especially like racial context, and then his response would be, oh, it's okay, Brianna's my Black friend. And I'd be like, you cannot say that. I do not give you one. I'm not okay with you saying that. Two, you having a black friend does not give you permission to speak poorly. And then when black people are offended, you use me as a scapegoat to be like, oh no, I'm cool. I have a black friend. It's fine. And I want to say that he was a kid. I want to say that, like maybe he didn't mean it the way that it was, but still, we were old enough to know that that was an inappropriate statement. And I think a lot of times, like, as we're growing, we know when we say something inappropriate, or we know when people have a response to something that we say. And even if they don't outwardly tell you, like, hey, that wasn't cool, that is an opportunity for us to start reflecting and get really curious of, like, hey, so I said something and I saw your face. I saw your body language. I felt like the atmosphere change. Will you tell me what it is that I did? Because I don't understand, but I can tell that it made you uncomfortable, or I can tell that it was the wrong thing to say. And then be open to them telling you what it is with no strings attached. In some of those conversations, sometimes I make the rule that if I'm having really hard conversations with people, or I need to tell someone something, or I need someone to tell me something, I will play the role of, I need to tell you something, but you're not allowed to respond. You're allowed to receive the feedback, say thank you, and walk away.
Ooh.
And sometimes sometimes that's what you need to do, because the point of allyship isn't to prove that you're not a bad person, or that
Yeah, it's not for
you're not.
debate.
Yeah, it's not up for debate. Like, if you hurt someone and you actually want to be accountable to the actions that you have, sometimes you have to go up to that person and be like, hey, I know something I said or something I did offended you earlier. Will you tell me what it is? And I won't respond if you don't want me to. I would love to at least just know what it is, so that way I can, like, work on it. And it's not the person that you hurt's responsibility to teach you why it was wrong. It's not their responsibility to help you fix it. It's not their responsibility to hold you accountable. It is, like, your responsibility to make better choices. And if that person chooses to help you or chooses to have a conversation with you, then that's icing on the cake. But they don't owe you an explanation of how you're not actually showing up and being a true ally to them. That's not their responsibility. It's not black women. It's not women of color. It's not people of color's job to teach you why the thing that you're doing is wrong. That's not our job.
No, truly. And I think like I would love to kind of dive more into like how allyship like gets performed, because like I think that it's so easy to think, "Oh, well, I don't do this or I don't do that," and to think that that makes you a better ally. But
Yeah.
there could be so many other things that happen, and I think one thing, a couple things. Like one, 2020, you talked about 2020, posting a black square.
Yes.
Posting a black square. If you posted a black square but then didn't do the actual work, like if you just were like, oh, everyone else is doing it because, and I don't like, and I care about my black friends, but like I also just don't want to be seen as like an outsider. Check yourself, like reflect on that. Like, let's be real. Or even if you're like tagging black creators without hiring them, if you are someone who's like, I support black, especially in the online space, if you're like, I'm someone who is inclusive and diverse, but you are not willing to hire anyone onto the back end of your team, whether that be hiring a coach, hiring a social media manager, hiring whoever, if you're going to talk the talk, walk the walk.
Yeah.
I say this a lot, especially just with not necessarily when it comes to race, but talking about when other women are like, I have a women first business and I am a female founder and I'm all about supporting and uplifting women. But then every single time that they're hiring for something, they're hiring a man. And I'm like, let's be real. If
Yeah.
you are all about inclusivity and diversity, show it. If you're going to make statements like I have a women first business or I have a diversity first business, show it. people notice. If you ever say to me that you have a women first business and then I see you hiring men, there are definitely people that I'm calling up and being like, yo, so and so did it again.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and even like on that same vein, like if you say that you support all women and you're hosting conferences and doing stuff and there's only white people on your panel, if and if you're a white coach right now and you're listening and you're like, well, I want to be inclusive. I want women of color and black women to be a part of my programs, but like no one hires me. No, none of those types of women hire me.
think about why.
Well, think about why. And
Why?
what are you doing to show them that they're welcome in your space? Does any of your marketing have women of color? Does any of your events have women of color? Are you hiring women of color? Or is it like come
No,
on now,
I
like, be so for real.
no, I literally did not go to a conference this year because when they released the lineup, it was a conference for women entrepreneurs. It was all white women. Every speaker, every panelist. And what made it even crazier is that the people running, there were 4 people running who coordinated and hosted. 2 of them were women of color. I was
Yeah.
baffled. But I also was like, how am I supposed to feel comfortable in a room? Because also when you look at the marketing afterwards and, they had a videographer there and a photographer and everything. And when you looked at the marketing that came after that, it was like there were so many white women, only white women in the room. But how am I supposed to feel comfortable showing up to an event like that if there's no one standing on that stage who looks the way that I do? How am I
Yeah.
supposed to know that I can be more if you aren't showing me what is possible outside of there being hosts? And I
Yeah.
think that also goes into like using diversity in photos in your marketing without really paying attention to power dynamics that go into it. Like, is it always like a white woman standing at the head of the table? Even when you're
Yeah.
looking at stock images, like, is it always a white woman standing at the head of the table, always on the stage? And then it's always women of color, people of color sitting at the table or sitting in the chairs looking up.
Right. Yeah, that's a huge one. To even put this in a different context, before I found like my photographers, because I take a lot of pictures, and so I have 2 women that are like my photographers. Like, if one can't do it, the other one usually can. But when I was in a season of like trying to find a photographer, especially like when I was getting married and doing things like that, one of the surefire ways that I knew that I wouldn't hire you is if you didn't have any pictures of people of color on your Instagram, because that shows me that you don't normally for like take pictures of people of color, and that tells me that you're probably not experienced with doing it and that your editing is probably going to suck, especially when you have like family who's a mixed little rainbow of like white, brown, black people in my family, that somebody's going to be washed out, somebody's going to be too bright. And so I actively look for photographers that have editing that I like, but editing with people who are the same complexion as me and my family. And if you only have white people in your thing, I will not hire you. Point blank, period. Because that
I
shows
mean,
me that
fair.
one, you're not even putting effort in. Because do you know how easy it is to be like, hey, person of color that I know, can I take some pictures of you for free or at a discount because I want to create a more diverse portfolio and let my clients know that I am comfortable taking pictures of them? It's not hard.
And also get practice editing. Like, as someone who works, like 90% of my clients are photographers, and we have these conversations. I'm so glad you brought this up. I might get a little too fired up. But like, no, truly, like, I understand not wanting to work for free, and I am very much a girl get your bag kind of gal. But like, I had a conversation with a client a few months ago. She was like, I really want to have a more diverse portfolio. How do I do that? I was like, just do a shoot for free. Like, yes, there's a time and a place to be charging, and like, definitely get your bag, girl. Get your bag. But also be intentional and really think about the business that you want and the brand that you want. And also, I've heard photographers say this before, so I'm just gonna like nip it in the butt right here. I don't fucking care if, oh, yes, my grid like on Instagram is like a lot of white couples, but I do have a lot of people of color in my portfolio. I can pull those for you. If it ain't on the fucking grid and it's not worth being on the fucking grid, check your
I don't
fucking
want it.
self.
Mm-hmm.
So passionate. You said photography, I said, "Oh girl." Like, because I think that so often it can be so easy to sit in this place, and not just photographers, but like in any service-based business where it can be so easy to be like, "Oh, I do work with people of color and I do have a diverse back like portfolio," and like to have that sit in the background and like hide it. If someone has to go searching for it, if someone has to reach out, if someone has to literally message you and say, "Are you comfortable?" Like, and I've literally heard my clients tell me about people who have messaged them and been like, I chose you because I felt comfortable knowing that you would be able to edit my skin tone. If someone has to ask you, are like, do you know how to edit a dark skin tone? You have an issue. You have an issue. And I believe that if you work in the wedding industry, if you have any bias whatsoever, if you are against like gay love, lesbian love, like biracial love, any of that, you should not be working in the industry. I'm gonna be so real. Like, this is a hot topic right now because we are filming/recording this episode at the end of June, so Pride Month, and this has been like such a hot topic this month, especially with the current state of the nation and our government and where politics are. But it's like, check yourself.
Yeah.
If you are hiding the diversity in your portfolio from public marketing, external marketing, why?
Yeah. And I also want to say that if you find yourself in this place and you're like, ooh, I don't have a diverse portfolio, I don't work with diverse clients, like, not all hope is lost. It's about like, once you have that realization, what do you do about it? I have a really good example of that in the coaching industry right now. So recently, I'm not ready to announce this secret project, but I was on a challenge for the secret project that I'm doing. And it was me and another and this white coach. And it was so good for me because it was before we started filming these projects. I didn't know the other woman who was in this challenge. And she straight up asked the coach, she was like, hey, okay, like obviously you're white, I'm black. Have you worked with other black people? And do you feel comfortable like performing these tasks, knowing that there's nuance within Black culture for what we're going to be doing? And the white coach, she was so sweet and she was so kind. And she was like, I've never been asked that before. And I could tell she got like maybe a little nervous. And she was like, I'm currently working with one, but you know, I don't know that there's anyone else. She's like, maybe if I took some time to like really go through all of my previous clients, there might be another one. But like off the top of my head, I can think of this one client that I'm currently working with right now. And this black woman was like, okay, cool. She was like, but with knowing that you have like this concern, knowing that there is nuances that I might not be able to understand, here are things that we could do to help make sure that the heart of the message that you're trying to portray still rings true and that I don't it unintentionally. And as we kept having conversations, you know, I eventually told her, I was like, hey, you know, like I don't mind that you haven't worked with a lot of Black women or women of color and that you're not like super versed in this particular like topic and the nuance that comes with me being a Black biracial woman about to embark on this project. I do care about your willingness to hear me when I tell you that I have a concern about something, your willingness to help me find resources if it's something that you don't feel like you have the capacity to do, and your willingness to not try to convince me that what I know isn't what I know. And she was like, I completely respect that. And I can promise you that if you choose to work with me, none of those things will be a concern. That I will help you find resources, that I will respect your viewpoint, that I will actively listen when you tell me something. And even if I can't ever understand because I'll never live that experience, I'll trust that what you're telling me is true. And that was all I needed to feel comfortable moving forward with working with her, is that the fact that she was open to having this conversation with me, and two, willing to put in the work and acknowledging that, like, yeah, this is different, because like some of the things that you're going to be talking about, some of the things that you're going to be doing, some of the ways that we might be marketing isn't going to fit like how I would do it as a white woman. And that made me feel really comfortable. So like you have the opportunity to do better. We both ended up signing with her. So now she's going to have two more women of color in her portfolio, so that way the next time a Black woman works with her, so far our experience has been great. So like pending that we continue having a great experiences, the next time somebody asks, she can be like, oh yeah, I have this person, this person, this person, and here's like their testimonial, and here's like the contact to be able to reach out to them. And then that can slowly grow if she continues to be intentional and she puts forth the effort to grow that muscle. And I
Yeah.
think that's all that we're asking, is that you be willing to put in the work to make it more inclusive, if that's actually what you want.
No, and I think that's, like, so big, and I remember when you first told me that story, like, I was like, "Yes, like, that's what we want." And even just, like, asking the question, I think that me personally going forward when I'm looking at coaching programs, that's something I'm going to be asking, because
Me too.
consult call, yes, is for a chance to see if a coach believes you're a good fit for their program, but you're also interviewing the coach. You're
Yeah.
also being like, "Are you a good fit for my needs and, like, where I'm at?" And I love that, one, she sat in that discomfort, because I can only imagine, like, what that could have been like for her on the receiving end of that question. But,
Yeah.
like, really being like, it wasn't a correction, but, like, she was very accepting of the fact of, like, "Hey, like, I'm kind of having to," you know, indirectly getting called out for the fact that there isn't diversity in my portfolio.
Yeah.
And I think she handled it with such grace, and then I really hope that she's proactive going forward and not just like this. Yes, in that moment, it was being very reactive to, like, "Okay, how am I going to answer Brianna's question? This is such a good question," and, like, "Fuck, like, is she gonna sign with me if I say the wrong thing?" Like, or everything,
Yeah.
but proactive going forward of, like, what things can she do to be more intentional with her work and the support that she provides, I think is, like, so big. And I think that really part of it is like getting over, for coaches, it's getting over this fear of being canceled, for
Yeah.
having hard conversations and sitting in that discomfort and being able to say, acknowledge when you've done some wrong,
Yeah.
or not even done some wrong, but like not done some right.
So, okay, let's talk about some ways that of like what real allyship and accountability can look like. So, it can mean like listening more than you speak, being like really open to feedback and just hearing other people's stories and experiences without like defensiveness. It's staying in the room when the discomfort comes up, being okay with the fact that like, oh, this sucks. And nobody likes to feel like they're being called out, but I think it says so much about your character when you're able to recognize like, oh, this sucks. This makes me feel kind of icky, but I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to get better, so I'm going to suck it up and sit here because it's important and I care about this work. Now, in the same vein, it's like doing your own internal work without demanding the emotional labor for other people. So, like I said earlier,
Amen.
it's nobody's responsibility to do this work for you or to teach you what you should and shouldn't do or what you should and shouldn't know. It's your personal responsibility to do that work, and pushing it off on someone else is fake allyship. So, if you're going to do the real thing, then do it. And if not, then don't waste anybody's time, because nobody wants to waste their breath on something that you don't actually want to do. So, just like being really intentional and really honoring people's time when they take the time to like have these conversations with you, because you have to also recognize that like a lot of these times like these conversations might be uncomfortable for you, but they can be really traumatic for the people. So if
Yeah.
they can sit through like the trauma of like actually sitting down, breaking down situations and explaining something to you, then you can sit for the hour conversation and be a little uncomfortable, that it hits home to you, that it makes you feel a little icky because maybe you haven't been doing things that you should be doing, right? And real allyship and accountability also looks like accepting correction without centering guilt or fragility. So you can't accept accountability and then be like, oh, I'm so awful. I can't believe, that I did that. I'm just a terrible person. That's not really taking accountability. That's you feeling bad, and then you want other people to feel bad for you so you don't have to feel bad anymore. That's fake. It's fake. Like, in the most loving way I can say, like, that is not helpful, and that doesn't display a desire for true allyship. And if that's the case, then, like, why are we even having this conversation, right? Like, if you want the people that you're having the conversation with to feel bad for you, then you're missing the plot again. So, like, let's just be conscious of those types of things. We also need to be making tangible shifts in behavior, policy, and community practices. So it's one thing, like, especially as a coach, for you to be doing the internal work, but still being in spaces and creating spaces that follow the status quo. If you're going to do the work, we need to externally see that work happening, and the way that you show up, the way that you're creating policies, the way that you're responding to policies in the industry, and the way that you're setting up your community. Okay. Finally, we need to be being proactive, not just reactive. So, just like Catrice was saying earlier, if you want to create those inclusive spaces, sometimes you're going to have to be reactive. In that example that I gave with that one coach, she had to react, but now she has an opportunity to be proactive and start creating opportunities, show that she's inclusive without someone having to ask first. Those are all things that you can be doing to provide allyship and accountability for people and not just be performative.
Yeah. And I think like when it comes to, we've talked about what does it look like, what doesn't it look like, and I think one thing that we've touched on this, but really the gap that there is within the coaching industry when it comes to accountability, I think that it can be so easy to get caught up in the status quo and what is considered normal and like the societal online norms of the online space of the coaching industry. And like the coaching industry is one that is unregulated, so there are no rules or laws that really regulate how we show up in this space, but it really comes down to our personal integrity. But like
Yeah.
the idea of like love and light culture often like leaves no room for correction. Like when you live in this like, oh, like everything needs to be kind of sunshines and rainbows and we are this positive space, like yes, you can have a positive and uplifting space, but you can also leave room for feedback. And it doesn't even have to be as harsh of a word as correction, but feedback. Like, are you really creating such a positive space in your online community when you're just looking at your Instagram presence to your community within your programs and the relationship dynamics that you are creating with your clients? If you are living in this like, oh, everything needs to be sunshine and rainbows and this love and light, are you leaving room for feedback, or are you trapping your clients in this place where they don't feel like they really can bring darkness or be a rainy cloud? And then I think another thing that I kind of highlighted earlier is this idea of coaches being afraid of being canceled over hard conversations. If you
Yeah.
are willing, kind of like Brianna's example and what she experienced, like if you're willing to have that conversation, Brianna's not going to turn around and be like, oh, yo, so and so, like she doesn't have anyone in her portfolio. Like it's not going to be this like shit talking fest.
Right.
The goal was to find a coach who can support her with this project.
Yeah.
And if you're not the right fit, that's okay. But it's
True.
about being able to have those hard conversations. Like, were you willing to have those hard conversations?
Yeah.
Like, we're done. This coach was willing to have that hard conversation. No one is at least I know I'm not. I know
Yeah.
I can't speak for everyone, but like I'm not going into these hard conversations when I do muster up the courage to be able to be like, "Hey, this hurt," or "Hey, like, do you have experience with this?" Or like I had an experience recently with a makeup artist who a photographer had hired for a styled shoot, who when I walked in to the studio to get my hair and makeup done, she definitely was prepared to do a blowout on my hair, but she didn't realize that I was mixed and have really curly hair. Like, you ain't doing no blowout, girly. You ain't, nope, not possible. And the tone of voice that she had was very like, oh, I wasn't told that you have curly hair. I then went to this photographer who I trust, who I know and I love so dearly, was just like, hey, like, one, I had this experience with one of your vendors. And two, in the future, I would really appreciate that if we're working together, and really for any other woman of color that you're working with, that you let your vendor team know, so then we aren't faced with that like kind of tension when we walk into a space. The goal is not to cancel, the goal is to make a better experience and environment for everyone. Like
Right.
at the end of the day, we just want, like, that's why we have this podcast. The goal is not to blame. We understand that there's a lot of nuance, that we cannot speak for every woman of color. But the goal is to kind of open up this dialogue, like, how can we make this industry better? This next point, we've talked about it in past episodes, but this idea of expecting to be celebrated for the bare minimum.
Mm.
Like white coaches specifically expecting to be celebrated for the bare minimum when, yes, there are multiple women of color in your programs. That to me is the bare minimum.
Yeah.
You should be actively like, if you want a woman of color in your spaces, you should be creating those spaces and being intentional about it. It doesn't need to
Yeah.
be like a quota. Oh, I've worked with X amount of Black girls this year.
Yeah. Because that feels icky, right? Like, nobody says, like, oh, I'm going to work with X amount of white people this year, you know? Like, it feels
Yikes,
icky.
imagine.
Imagine. Well, this even plays into life, like politics, you know? Like, I was having this conversation after the Barbie movie came out. And, you know, if you've seen Barbie, one of the scenes is like, there's the Supreme Court and all the justices are women. I was having a conversation with some people and I was like, can you imagine if all the Supreme Court justices were women? And they were like, that would be unfair. That's crazy. I was like, do you know how long the Supreme Court justices were only men? Do you recognize that there's only been men presidents? Like, so why is it okay if it's only men, but it could never be only women? And that's where we start like recognizing our own biases and like our own thoughts of like, oh, well, it's always been this way. So that's like the only way it can be. And it can start pushing against the narrative because like we've had 57 presidents and all of them have been men, then what would be so bad if the next 57 were all women? That sounds crazy, but like we just did it in the reverse, you know? So it's like things like that. I'm not saying that it has to be that extreme, but like start being okay with the idea that maybe it should look a little bit different than what our normal is, and that's okay.
I'm gonna be real. Right now, the bare minimum is at like an all-time low. The bare minimum should not be like, oh, I hope one day we'll have one Black president, or
Yeah.
that maybe one day all the Supreme Court justices will be all women. The bar is low.
Yeah.
The bar is low. And
Like you can
it's
talk
kind of
over
sucky.
it. It's
Like,
fine.
it's kind of sucky that we're missing it. Some other points for kind of where the gap is this idea that being trauma informed means that you can't be called out.
Yeah, like we literally have worked with a coach who's like, yeah, I'm trauma informed and I'm an ally, and I'm just like, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean
Anyone can
anything.
say it. Like, let's be real. Anyone can say they're trauma informed. Who's gonna check your credentials?
But whose trauma are you informed of?
Oh, oh, she said it, y'all. She said it.
Because not mine. And if you are, then like shame on you because the way that you're like behaving does not show me that you are trauma informed on my trauma. And if that's like the reality of like the people working with you, then I don't think that it's like fair to say that like nobody can correct you or inform you of the harms that you're doing just because you have a certification. If someone's actively telling you that you're harming them in some way, then obviously you have more trauma to be informed on.
I'm gonna be real. What does it even mean to be trauma informed? Everything impacts people in such different ways.
Yeah.
And just because you're trauma informed, or just because you have X, Y, and Z degree, or you took X, Y, and Z program and now you're certified in X, Y, and Z, doesn't mean that you can't be called out when you are in the wrong. And it doesn't mean
Yeah.
that you are wiped clean of any wrongdoing.
Yeah. And let's just be honest, you don't become an ally and then like you're done. Like Allyship is a continual conversation. It's a continual walk. You can get it right sometimes and you can get it wrong other times. And it's not a matter of keeping like score of, oh, you were a bad ally this day, so you have to make up for it by being a good ally.
5 Hail Marys.
Like, no, that's not that's not it. Like, because that within itself is still performative. We're talking about true heart transformation where we are continually working towards a better reality. And that means sometimes we're going to mess it up. Sometimes we're going to say the wrong thing. Sometimes we're going to go into old patterns and old habits that are harmful. But then what do you do afterwards? It's the accountability piece. It's being brave enough to say, I messed that up. Like, I shouldn't have said that. I know better than to have said that. I need to go apologize. I need to go make a statement. I need to go tell them, like, hey, I know I can't make it right, but I want you to know that I recognize that this was wrong and I'm actively working to do better. That's all anybody wants. Nobody expects you or wants you to show up perfectly. They want to see that you're actively trying, and that's enough.
If you can just try, you would get so much further than fighting it.
Yeah.
And then the final point for kind of like the notes that we had on the gap, and something that I've noticed a lot, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, but like Black and brown clients being forced to choose between growth and safety. And we kind of talked about this and highlighted this a lot in talking about code switching and like
Yeah.
why does code switching happen, and creating spaces where your people of color in your programs don't need to perform.
Yeah.
And like, are you really doing the work? And again, are you making the conscious efforts to create a space where they can take off their masks? They can really show up as they are, whether that's really passionate or soft spoken, or being able to unpack something that happened. Because also, the online world is a very scary place for people of color, especially business owners of color. The scrutiny comes from all angles, especially as a woman of
Yeah.
color running her own business. And safety is also feeling safe enough to speak up when a coach has done wrong. Are you creating a space where they can actually be like, hey, you said something and that made me feel uneasy. Like, that was a microaggression
Yeah.
and that hurt.
Yeah. Just even thinking about it, like, this podcast itself has been like a huge thing that me and Catrice have had lots of conversations and have really had to work through. Like, is it worth the scrutiny? Is it worth the negative feedback that we're likely going to receive? Even if we come in with clear minds and good intentions and like a good heart, there's still going to be people who don't like it. And so, friends, just thought of it, but like, this is a great time for you to practice your allyship. Like, being kind, being supportive, really sitting with this conversation and seeing like where are the things that we're saying that's like rubbing against you, and like where is that coming from, and why is it coming up for you. And then practicing kindness and giving other people the benefit of the doubt of saying, hey, I don't know if you meant it this way. I don't know if whatever, but I'm going to assume you have good intentions until you show me otherwise. I think there's a piece for Black and brown people to really put on our compassion cap and recognize that when we see people actively trying to have conversations to do better, we should assume they have good intentions until they prove to us otherwise, and that we should give them an opportunity to grow and change. Even if they've been problematic in the past, if we can see that they're actively doing the work to be better, then we should give them an opportunity to be better. Because sometimes, like, if someone hurts you or something happens, it's a natural response to be kind of standoffish. But when people show up and is actively doing the work and you can see it, I think it is part of our responsibility that we are open to allowing people to grow and get better.
Yeah. Brianna, I think they're ready for a heart check.
Yeah. So, friends, I just want us to remember allyship isn't about being perfect. It's about being present, being teachable, and being willing to shift. Go in with open hearts and just be willing to sit in that uncomfortable space and see what's coming up for you, and then actively take the time to grow and move forward. So, Today, I want you to be thinking about where in your work are you expecting grace without offering growth? This is specifically for our white creators. Where are you expecting people to give you the benefit of the doubt without you actually showing that work? Because that goes against what I was just saying, right? If you're not doing the work, you can't have this expectation that everybody's going to give you the benefit of the doubt. So it's part of your job to actually do the work for people to offer you grace. What would it look like for you to take radical responsibility for the space that you hold? What would it look like for you to show up as your full self and be really open and really comfortable with being who you are and not shrinking? And do you have a space and the ability to do that? And if not, why are you in spaces that you can't do that? And where can you create your own spaces to have that freedom and ability to just really be yourself, and taking the responsibility that it's not on anyone else to show up for you, but it's on you to show up for yourself and for others around you.
Awesome. That's a wrap. We're 3 Black women and their white coach, and this conversation has just begun.
Friends, thanks so much for joining us today.
We've loved getting to spend this time here with you, but don't let the conversation stop here. Drop us a message or connect with us on social media. All the details can be found in the show notes,
along with some great resources to help you on this journey of helping make the coaching industry more inclusive. Until next time, we're 3 Black women
and their white coach,
doing the work, holding the space, and building something better.